So please welcome today, we have moderator Natalie Finlayson, who is Associate Director at KPMG Channel Islands, alongside our panellists, Harriet Assam, Head of Sustainability at the British Private Equity and Venture Capital Association. We have Amy Lazenby, Managing Director at Close Brothers Asset Management, John Pepin, Chief Executive of Philanthropy Impact, and Tonya Blahotnik, Vice President of Climate and ESG Capital Markets at NatWest. And they're going to be discussing the opportunities within private funds for net zero. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Steph. In the prep call we had so many different opinions, so I'm really excited for this panel. I think it's going to be exceptionally interesting. But without any further ado, let's begin, because we've got a jam-packed session ahead. Harriet, the first question I'd like to ask is for you. And it's a big one, so feel free to break it into sections. What is the current status of some of the leading climate, sustainability, and nature-related regulations and standards? So we've got things like ISSB, TCFD, CSRD, and the list goes on. And then the second part of the question is, how are these new standards being perceived by the BBCA members and finance community?
Sure, thank you. Right, I've got 2 pages, in fact 3 pages, so I'm going to try and summarise it really.
Shall we just
yes, maybe. I'm thinking maybe because, yeah. But, I mean, yeah, there's a huge amount of acronyms out there, and I think that's probably certainly one of the challenges that our members are facing in terms of how they're unpicking this and applying this. I'm going to try and summarise it and give a bit of an update into it. Obviously, I decided to break it down into having that UK focus. Obviously, the SDR, the Sustainability Disclosure Regulations. We're still waiting for the final regulations to be launched. It's been delayed again by the FCA. But I think what our general opinion on that is that the FCA seems to be very conscious of the UK regulatory framework place and how they implement that. And to date, what they seem to be proposing, in our opinion, seems to be quite simple. I mean, observations are that it's obviously focused in on the retail market. It's got a focus on interoperability, which seems quite sensible, and it also has a good lens on materiality and flexibility out there. The second one, which a lot of people will have heard of, is the TCFD. We've all touched on it. It keeps feeding into certain questions. And this is becoming an important standard for climate-related financial disclosures. It's been voluntarily adopted by an increasing number of corporates, firms, and investors, and also underpins our regulatory climate reporting regime. So we're starting to see that be well embedded. Feeding into that is obviously the disclosures, the ISSB. I think that's a hot topic at the moment. We've seen that launched 2 standards or 2 frameworks, disclosure frameworks, the IFRS 1 and the IFRS 2. IFRS 1 is sustainability focused, whereas IFRS 2 is TCFD focused. I think the UK is currently going out to consultation on that, and whether we're going to endorse that through the sustainability disclosure standards. Then looking a bit further afield and pushing out into the EU, I mean, obviously there's a whole load of further acronyms I can spout out here. We've got the SFDR, we've got the CSRD, we've got the EU SDS, the CSDDD, and I mean, and the list is endless. And I think there is just a lot of competing regimes out here. There's a lot of requests out there to disclose, and I think, yes, we're all kind of looking at how we can kind of look at the key elements of that and embed it. The other key one out there is the TNFD. We've all kind of spoken about that today, I think, and it's one that I'm always really interested in. Being a geographer at heart, I'm always really interested in biodiversity, but I think it's going to be challenging in terms of how that private markets implements that disclosure framework. So the UK is committed to looking at how they implement that into our regulation landscape. And ISSB have also looked at how they build that into our disclosure framework.
It's really interesting, and thanks so much. I appreciate it. It is a rather complex and very technical section or question of it. I think what we all hope to see is that those frameworks do start to align. ISSB is the first move of that. But one of the panelists mentioned earlier how challenging it is that there's so much initiative behind reporting that it makes it exceptionally challenging. So definitely a space to watch on that. Tanya, from your side, what are the regulations and standards being perceived, or sorry, how are they being perceived by the investment management industry? And are they seen merely as a compliance exercise largely, or looking at the title of what we're talking about today, are people seeing the opportunities that are involved and those available to portfolio companies?
Yes, absolutely. So the challenges coming with the forthcoming and existing regulations and disclosure frameworks and due diligence regulations, they're widely acknowledged and recognized, and we do tend to hear a lot of moaning in the industry about it, and we appreciate it as an institution who also need to comply with all these frameworks. However, increasingly we are seeing, and including ourselves actually, we are seeing investors perceiving the outcomes of the regulations, or I would say the objectives of the regulations, as a key opportunity and also as something that helps drive the market. In terms of the, if we look at the fund management industry in particular, I mean, we would say that clear, transparent disclosures and compliance with the regulation can definitely create a point of competitive advantage for the fund managers, because ultimately investors themselves are looking for the transparent disclosures and that information, because they are struggling themselves with the data sourcing. The most recent survey actually conducted by FTSE Russell's, they run it on an annual basis where they survey about 350 asset owners across pension funds, insurance companies, endowments, governments, etc. They found that the asset owners mentioned that data challenge is probably the challenge number one for them in order, like in their efforts embedding sustainability into their investment strategies. So obviously this trickles down to the fund management industry. However, using the regulation also as a tool to engage with the portfolio companies has been a powerful tool. Ultimately, I want to say that it has been, in a good sense, it has been an excuse for the fund managers industry to go ahead and talk to their portfolio companies and say, look, we are required to comply with the EU SFDR, with the TCFD, with the EU taxonomy, and then UK regimes are coming, and it's here to stay. And actually, this is coming for you guys, portfolio companies, to at first large companies, then it's going to come down to smaller companies as well. Even for those companies for whom regimes won't be mandatory, investors will require this information. So I think we definitely see those investors who started to engage with the companies earlier on, the asset managers, they managed to produce better disclosures themselves, and this is perceived as a very positive point by investors. And within our team, and just a few words to mention where I sit. So I sit in our investment banking capital markets arm of NatWest. So we have Climate and ESG Capital Markets Group, and we primarily help our clients raise public debt in green social sustainability format. So we work with both investors and companies across a wide range of industries, and we work with private funds as well. So within our group, on an annual basis, we conduct various benchmarking analysis where we look at the disclosures by, for example, banks. We do the TCFD benchmarking for banks. We do the same for private funds as well, just to understand how disclosures are developing. And also when we provide this type of benchmarking to investors, they find it incredibly valuable, because ultimately I think everyone is here to be able to embrace the best practice. And of course, regulations and trying to, like the process of trying to understand how to comply with the regulations has also driven a lot of innovation in sustainable finance space. We're seeing new products coming out, obviously, new types of fund structures. We talked a lot about the voluntary carbon markets and how, for example, some of the fund structures have begun to integrate this asset class into their portfolios. And we are definitely seeing this interest on our side as well. So these are some of the opportunities to highlight. I would just say that the challenges are there, but regulation's here to stay. So it's probably better to try to find out how this is going to help position investment management industry going forward. But yeah, data is a key issue, and we just see that we are seeing the increased importance of the credible data providers, because ultimately it would be a rare case that fund managers would be sourcing that information on a continuous basis from portfolio companies. So the reliance on data providers will remain there.
Could I just add something?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks. We had an invite-only meeting with CEOs of wealth management firms just a couple of weeks ago, and you could just feel the tension dropping slightly because Consumer Duty is now in place. But what really came out of it, which is very satisfactory, is that they're looking to enhance their current propositions, and they're looking at values-based conversations with clients. Really big shift in the whole area of suitability.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Tanya. Amy, from your side, and looking from a Close Brothers perspective, what are the standards that you see that are coming through or that are getting implemented into the investment portfolios?
So regardless of whether a client has a sustainability mandate or what we might call a conventional mandate, there are probably two core principles that we apply across the entire firm, and they would be the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment, which is all about the incorporation, the analysis and incorporation of environmental, social and governance factors in client portfolios and reporting on that. And we're signatories of the UK Stewardship Code, and that's about that's a code of 12 principles for asset managers and asset owners to try and create a better environment and society and economy to invest in. And most recently, we're signatories of the Net Zero Asset Managers Accord, and these are all very positive frameworks. But these apply across the whole of the sort of investment structure. But it's so much more interesting what we do for the individual clients who are wanting those sustainable mandates. It can go so much further than just the numerous acronyms that are thrown out there, which are vitally important and incredibly supportive of this change and transition that we're seeing. And that is creating sustainable portfolios, because back at the end of the 90s and in the early 2000s, when we were running private client portfolios, charity portfolios, they were effectively 100% UK assets. And if you're exceedingly exotic, you might have a 3% allocation to a global equity fund. So very different. The whole industry has evolved and changed dramatically in the last 25 years. But it meant that ethical clients who wanted to put in place something that aligned with their moral values had an exceedingly different experience from everybody else. Because if you're benchmarking against an index like the FTSE 100, it's got the oil, it's got the mining, it's got the tobacco, the alcohol. It's pretty much everything that you might not typically associate with a sustainable portfolio. And it was very negative. It's all about exclusions. But the advent of, and this isn't regulation, but these are nevertheless vitally important frameworks, the advent of the Sustainable Development Goals in December 2015, and shortly thereafter the Paris Climate Accord, created a really positive framework for investments. And I think it's fantastic because you can now create a portfolio of sustainable investments, aligning revenue which aligns with these goals, which are supported by global government regulation and global government finances, which therefore have by far and away the greatest opportunity of creating the most money for investors, but that also happen to align beautifully with one's moral compass, sustainable values. And I think it's a very happy story within the confines and context of an increasingly heavily regulated industry.
Thanks, Amy. I would like to remind you that you can post your questions, same like the first panel, so please do so. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end to take some of those questions. Changing themes a bit, so let's move away from standards and let's move on to the role of advisors in creating change. John, I haven't forgotten about you, so you're up next.
I don't know why you're saying we should move away from standards when you're talking about me.
Very sharp, John, very sharp. What is the role of financial advisors here? Is it sticking to regulation, or is it about driving change? And how do the views across the spectrum of capital vary?
Can I tell you a story first? It's based on the keynote speaker you had earlier. Brilliant speech, great points. You might have noticed I have a Canadian accent, and what I miss living here in the UK for the last 25 years is going snowshoeing. How many people have ever snowshoed? Ah, brilliant. So I used to go into the forest in Ontario and snowshoe at minus 35 or minus 40 degrees. And usually it's not that cold, it's very sunny. So you would go into the woods to stay out of the wind because it's so cold, but it gets very hot snowshoeing. So what I would do is I'd find a place in the sun and protect it out of the wind, and then I'd start to strip down because you're hot. And then as nature is naturally healing, I would then take out a bottle of wine, some pâté, and some cheese and have a picnic at 35 or 40 degrees below zero. It was just outstanding. The other thing that's really neat, if you ever do, neat is Canadian, by the way. It means
my boss is Canadian, so yeah.
So you know what I mean. Good. Is if you snowshoe and you come across a pine forest, if you snowshoe into the middle of that pine forest, it is absolute silence, unbelievable silence, and so peaceful, so tranquil that well, I don't know how to say it, but your whole feeling, I was going to use religious terms, but I'm not, yeah, it just is unbelievable. So, okay, sorry, but I thought I'd tell you that story, seeing as everyone else is telling stories today. Okay, so we work across the spectrum of capital, from philanthropy right through to impact investing. Our focus is on professional advisors and encouraging them to support their clients around values-based discussion. We recently did a study of millennials, Gen Z, and women of wealth who are wealth holders. And we had someone talk to each one of them about their whole approach to investment and to their professional advisors. What was really neat that came out of it was that they saw the world as changing and that they wanted to use their wealth to do good with their money and to help them live their values. I don't know if a lot of advisors understand where these young people are coming from, because we've also seen studies of millennials going into wealth management firms feeling totally alienated and leaving the organization. The study clearly indicated that the professional advisor industry is falling short to help them achieve what they want, and so they're firing their advisors. Really significant change. And they saw that key obstacles in the firms that they were dealing with, and we're starting to design a training program for Gen Z and millennials on how to select advisors and how to manage their advisors, because they're very frustrated. They have a lot of money, and they're very frustrated in terms of doing with that money. So they saw the obstacles as not having a clear strategy and services to meet their needs. Knowledge of the advisors and the credibility of the firms was questioned, and they saw that in the firms there's a lack of leadership commitment. So it was really quite fascinating. We've also identified 23 distinct services that are needed by these people, from philanthropy, from doing philanthropy right through to impact investing. So to answer your question, which was what's driving change, young people. Did I miss Did I miss a question?
No, I think that's
No,
great.
got the question.
You sure?
Yeah, you got it.
Can I also point out, I know that I have to be careful about how I say this, but I'm the only one on this panel that has no hair. I don't know if that's deliberately chosen for that. Do you know, did you do that? Oh, thanks. Over to you.
Thanks, John. Amy, I'm going to switch back onto you. How important do you think communication is to investors, and how can firms do it better?
I think it's really important. I think we've moved on from a world where clients just want to have the financial impact of their portfolio reported to them on a quarterly and half-yearly basis. And if you can communicate the impact that the investee companies are having without it necessarily having to be an impact portfolio at the outset, then I think it really helps engage the clients more on the journey and helps them participate more in the understanding of what you're trying to do and encourage them to work with you and creating a better outcome. We set these portfolios up back in 2017 when they evolved from what were negative ethical portfolios to positive framework, in alignment with these goals and things that were created, which made for a much better world. And we started trying to communicate impact back then because we felt it was something that was going to be very important. But it's quite difficult to access the same type of data and create relay the impact to clients. And it's been a work in progress for a number of years. But most recently, we signed a contract with a data provider called NetPurpose. And I think now we have a couple of clients here. But I do hope now that this is an impactful and meaningful way of communicating to clients what we're doing in their portfolios. And we do it in two different ways. We do it at a portfolio level and the monetary value of their investments and how that's having an impact, and at an individual company level. So I can say, last week I saw a client that we look after who has a £15 million equity portfolio. And I was able to tell them that the three main UN goals that their portfolio touched were Goal 1, which was zero poverty and through investments in companies like MasterCard and Visa. Their monetary investments specifically helped the inclusion of 1,622 individual customers previously excluded from financial services. It touched Goal 3, which is good health and well-being, and through investments in global healthcare businesses, their money specifically gave 1,222 patients access to treatment. And Goal 7, which is always the most interesting and easy one to talk about in this sustainable perspective, which is affordable and clean energy, through their investments in renewable energy technologies, the money that they specifically invested in these companies created 1,262 megawatt hours of renewable energy. And the way we make that meaningful is 564 metric tons of CO2 avoided because they're using renewable energy instead. And that's the equivalent to removing 121 cars from a road for a year. And that is meaningful. And the other way we communicate is through individual companies. And I was really pleased that Ben highlighted Microsoft, because there are so many renewable technology businesses that are easier to talk about. But really, we need these global behemoths to believe in sustainability and affect this change, because they have the links with government, they have the finances, and they have the wherewithal to create change. And aside from it being a great share price, so it's all good for investors, companies like Microsoft are vitally important. They have moved our entire ecosystem from these very energy-intensive data centers to the cloud. And we think that's great, but what we might not realize is that has resulted in an 89% reduction in energy use. They have an 85% recycle rate for all their hardware. They still have 3.3% of their plastics in their business, which are single use, and they will be all abolished in the next 15 months. Companies like Microsoft can really make a change. And when we can communicate this to clients, we can say, your investment in Microsoft is going to be net waste, positive water, negative carbon by 2040. This is a business that's really affecting change. And they feel quite empowered by that, I think. And this is something we do for each of the companies in the portfolios.
Thanks, Amy.
Brilliant.
I'm going to...
Absolutely brilliant.
Do any of the panelists have anything they want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think it's great because it makes it more tangible, relatable. I mean, it's not just about data, but it's like, how is that what you're doing driving that change that we're all gathering that data for, and the reason behind what we're doing. So it almost makes a case study of it, doesn't it? And it showcases why it's important to us and where it feeds into that ecosystem.
Sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that it's super important, like on the impact measurement and reporting. That I mean, there are various challenges, especially when it comes to the social side, because the social side is like heavily contextualized, and the same we're going to see on the nature and biodiversity side. Again, you need to consider where you are doing nature conservation, preservation, and doing this type of reporting tracking manually is a tedious task. So it's a really welcome development that there are companies coming to the market who will be able to provide that kind of almost real-time information on the across the impact spectrum. But I just wanted to reinforce that's really brilliant to hear.
Good. Can I add? No?
No, sure, go for it. No, that was a nod, not a no. Go for it, Joe.
I think it's absolutely amazing what you're doing. And what's amazing, not only what you're doing, but is the excitement that you have about doing it. And so it's not doing it because it's just regulation. It's doing it because you're just passionate about it. I think it's wonderful. And I like you too. You're okay. Well, everyone's okay.
Okay, I'm going to take the heat off of the panelists for only about 30 seconds. And I have a question for the audience. Who of you feel really strongly about offsets? Will you raise your hand, for those of you that do?
Strongly about
offsets. Offsets in general. Are you who is very against offsets? Oh, really? No one. Who's very for offsets?
Wow.
Okay. Well, you're really going to enjoy the next section that we're going to be discussing, because it's on offsets and net zero. So Amy, back to you. As we approach 2030 and 2050, how important are offsets going to be to helping companies reach net zero? And how are your clients balancing emissions reductions with the need to offset?
So we had data out in August, and 5,400 companies have now announced their net zero targets and or have announced targets in line with science-based targets initiatives. So we have data that shows how far we are from where we need to be to get emissions to 1.5 degrees and where we're going to end up. So from that respect, offsets are going to play a very important role in helping meeting those targets. But in addition to that, not only do they help companies meet their targets, but they provided much needed finance. They reduce the cost of renewable technologies. They help the clean air, the biodiversity, and they're really important for certain hard-to-abate sectors like steel, transport, and cement. And those three sectors alone account for 25% of greenhouse gas emissions globally, so it's important. But to put it into context, in 2022, corporations purchased 151 million metric tons purchased and cancelled out of carbon offsets, and yet every year we generate 50 billion. So it is a tiny, weeny percentage of the overall pot. But clients, and I think there's also a stat out from Oxfam, which is that if corporates want to use land to offset, then they're going to have to purchase land 5 times the size of India. So alone, these aren't going to work, but I think they're a very important addition. But clients don't need to invest in companies that are, looking to have offsets. I don't think in general terms clients really mind about the journey. They want to look at the end goal. But there are companies they can invest in that are going to be pure net zero candidates. Companies like, well, there are many. There's a company called Ørsted, which in itself 10 years ago was a very dirty coal business, and over the last 10 years has transitioned to the world's largest offshore manufacturer of offshore wind turbines. And during that 10-year period, its revenues increased by 85%. So it's a good story for growth in renewable technologies. This company has reduced its CO2 budget by 98% since 2006. It is a fantastically renewable target. I think in 2022, it had its science-based targets to achieve net zero by 2040 ratified. And it happens to be a totally unloved company by the stock market at the moment. Share price is sort of rock bottom, and this isn't a sales tip, but it's something that we're definitely looking at from an analysis perspective, because nobody wants to know about it. And someone mentioned earlier that, you know, we've momentarily forgotten about sustainability because in 2022, oil was the only sector that made you any money. And so for the moment, everyone's all over it, you know, forgotten about it. But this is not a trend that is going away. This is a huge investment opportunity to take advantage of the unloved share prices of these real net zero businesses that don't need the carbon offsets, because they're looking very attractively valued at the moment. And I definitely think we need more investment in offshore wind to get to where we need to get to from a regulatory perspective.
Absolutely. Harriet, from your side, what's your take? Do you think firms can reach the goals that they've set in terms of net zero?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, as Amy kind of said, in my view, you can't. No one's going to be able to reach net zero without offsets. I mean, obviously, you build that into, you measure your footprint, you look at how you can reduce that, and then offset should be your final straw in terms of you offset what you can't reduce.
And I think that's the key point, really, right?
Yeah, and I think offsets have. It's nice to say in an audience where we're allowed to talk about offsets, because I know back. Home, sorry, I'm saying home. Back in the UK and audiences back there, we can be a bit more tentative about it.
I was at a conference 2 weeks ago in London, Sustainability Line, and the topic came up of offsets, and people were just going crazy in the audience about it. They were so against it. They were like, it just shouldn't be a thing. So interesting how the sentiment changes depending on who you're chatting to.
It is, and I think what's great is the UK are getting behind it. They're building that credibility behind it. They're making it into a robust market. And certainly here in Guernsey, we're really hearing the importance of it and the value it can play. And I think the key thing here is that you're going to need those offsets. They're quite cheap at the moment, I guess. But soon, I think demand is going to outweigh supply. And that's going to be costly for our members to be able to achieve it. And I think that also drives opportunity, interest in terms of how you can achieve those targets over the long run. But I mean, one interesting angle was KETA. I mean, I never thought about the insurance side of it and the cost that's going to add to it. But I mean, it's going to be needed, isn't it? I mean, I think that's a really interesting angle that you've got to build on, reflect into all this.
Thanks, Harriet. Tanya, how has NatWest been looking at the issues and opportunities around carbon offsets?
Yeah, sure. So as NatWest Group, we do have net zero targets by 2050, and the targets have been validated against the SBTi standard this year. So the targets have been set across our financing and operational activity. And within the effort to reduce the operational activity, we are saying that the emissions from our own value chain operations would need to reduce at least by 90% by 2050. However, there is recognition that there would always be residual emissions out there, and we're committed to offset those emissions via high quality carbon credits. But we're not obviously waiting for the time to pass. We've been purchasing carbon credits over the last few years. Like last year, we bought 120,000 carbon credits. And there is a very rigorous process set up internally to make sure that the credits we buy, they actually they are of the top quality. So we have a committee represented by risk, legal, business, compliance, you name it, and there is internal documentation and protocols that are being followed for us to purchase the carbon credits for our internal purposes. And I should say, just to comment on the demand-supply dynamic, yeah, there is definitely sheer supply of low-carbon credits out there, and that's why it feels like the market is flooded by cheap, low-quality credits. And what we are seeing already that actually there is a shortage of supply of high-quality carbon credits building up already. When we talk to our customers, and we do have carbon markets teams set up in business, and the role of that team would be to facilitate transactions, purchase and sale of credits on behalf of our clients. So when we talk to clients, they're trying to understand the role of carbon credits, whether they need to buy them or not, because indeed there is a lot of negative press, there is a lot of caution around greenwashing risk. I mean, rightly so. So there is a group of customers who are cautious. The other ones, they understand the role, they want to lead, they want to reduce carbon emissions beyond their own value chain, so they would like to become carbon positive. So there are different camps. We are certainly seeing that, well, if I look at the entire carbon markets ecosystem, how it developed over the last couple of years, whilst the size of the market hasn't quite grown, but I think with a number of data platforms, trading platforms, again, insurance companies stepping into this market, it's becoming ready to create and facilitate the high integrity market in the future. We do need a bit of, I guess, broad understanding what a high quality carbon credit is and how to get it. There are various initiatives happening right now by it's set up by the International Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets, who are looking to set the standards which would define the credibility of carbon credits. There is a separate initiative backed up by the UK government. It's called Voluntary Carbon Markets Integrity Initiatives. They published a voluntary code around how companies can claim the use of carbon offsets. So in the European Union, actually, the European Commission has published their initial proposal around the certification of carbon removals, which is a voluntary standard. But again, it is a lot of it's a lot happening. It's just there would need to be a bit of time for the market to learn again and uptake this new standards. But we do as NatWest, we do believe that there is a very important role to play of the voluntary carbon markets and the carbon credit mechanisms.
Thanks, Tanya. We only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to move on to the Slido questions. There's some really good ones, so I do want to get to them. The first one, and it builds on what we've just been talking about in terms of offsets and net zero, is what is the panel reaction to the announcements coming from the UK government today on potentially watering down commitments? How does this impact finance?
Well, if the UK government keeps changing as regularly as it has done in the last few years, I don't think we need to worry too much about the impact they're going to have, given the huge weight of money and broad acceptance of the need for adoption of these renewable technologies in the future. So while it may be disappointing at a headline level, I'm not too concerned.
I'm glad you said that, because I would have been much more rude. Very diplomatic. Thank you.
Just to say that, the UK climate targets are legislated. They're enshrined in law, including the targets to reach net zero by 2050 and reduce carbon emissions by 78% by 2035. So I think the long-term trajectory is out there. So the changes in the governments and the changes in their political messages, I would say that they're not helping. Of course, they're confusing the market and they're distracting, investors from the targeted effort. But I would not see it as the major concern as of the moment.
I think it's. I mean, from our perspective, looking at it probably a bit more of a higher level up, where the BVCA feeds in, it's just that uncertainty it feeds in. It's dilly-dallying around, and they've identified private capital as needed to help plug this public fund deficit that's out there to achieve net zero. But unless they give this confidence and clarity in what they're backing, it's difficult to get behind things with that long-term horizon on. So it's very much mixed signals. It's
I spent in high school. I was a bit of a deviant brat, and in grade 11, I don't know what the equivalent is here. The physics department or classroom was a double classroom, so all the students would be on one side, and then me and maybe someone else on the other side, which was called exterior darkness. And I think we should establish a special room for that for the current government. Exterior darkness. That explains a lot of my. Never mind.
I've got a question for the audience based on these things that are coming in. So the situation at the moment is that the UK government will not dig, go to its North Sea oil fields and get gas out that is there, because it is a green government. So Norway gets the gas out of the same fields, and we pay Norway 14 billion a year to supply 70% of our gas. Now, nothing is straightforward, and we can look at it all sorts of different ways, but this is very much a journey, and there will be all sorts of cynics who find it very easy to pull the various actions of different governments and what people are saying apart. But I don't think it detracts from the longer-term pathway to a more sustainable future, and I'm very confident that we'll get there.
Excellent.
We are out of time.
Can I say something? I'm sorry.
Okay, go, John.
I mean, what's time?
My clock's actually broken, so we can go with that, John.
Oh, okay. On Friday, we're holding a special session on the data that we've done and how advisors can, I'm doing a paid political announcement here, how advisors can address those issues that are coming from Gen Z and millennials. So you're all welcome to attend. Do you want to tell them where it is? In offices. In their offices at 12 o'clock, right? Yeah. For an hour and a half. How exciting. The other thing is that, can I keep going for a second more? We run these seminars and stuff online, and I have the distinct pleasure of letting them always go over so that people can make some really brilliant points. This is not going to happen here.
Then I'm going to keep you on a tight time, Jake, John.
Yeah. I guess there's one thing I would like to add. I've probably talked to 40, in the last several months, 40 chief executives of private banks and wealth management firms. And it was really amazing having those discussions. There was only one who ranted for 30 minutes. I hope he's not in the room. Ranted for 30 minutes about consumer duty and about the fact that, and he was quite deviant in the sense of all the conversations that I had. The fact that his clients were wealthy and all they want to do is make money. So I mean, that's a good sign, because that was, from what I gather, 10 or 15 years ago, everyone was trying to maximize their financial return. So can I leave it on that positive note? The industry is changing, and Gen Zs, millennials, and women of wealth are driving that change. So get on the, is it on the bandwagon? Is it? Bandwagon. Oh, yeah, whatever. Anyway, do you want me to stop now?
Please. Thank you so much.